Hello everyone. This is Venkatramana, Professor of Automobile Engineering Department, VNR Vijay IIT. Today, now I'm going to introduce a course called Manufacturing Technology. This course is a part of our one domain of mechanical engineering. What is a manufacturing technology? In simple definition, the manufacturing technology is defined as conversion of raw material into finished goods is called as manufacturing process. That means the raw material which is available from the mines is not having a uniform shape, and the way we want it will not be available. So that raw material we will convert into a required shape like cylinders, billets, blooms, etc. So there are this is one of the definition. There are different definitions are available. For example, a manufacturing technology that provides the tools which enables the production of all manufacturing goods by using machine tools which are non-portable, power-driven manufacturing machinery, and systems used to perform the specific operation on the man-made materials to produce durable goods for the consumers. And there is another definition is also there, that is manufacturing is the production of components for the use or sale using labor and machine tools. And one more definition, it is in a branch of mechanical engineering that refers to a commercial industrial production of goods with the help of machines and tools. So these are the different definitions of manufacturing process or manufacturing technology. So you can see here, this is one of the manufacturing process where you can see a lot of liquid material is poured into a one location, and that location we call as a mold cavity. And the raw okay here the raw material is converted into liquid state, and the material we are pouring into a mold cavity where the liquid material is converted into a solid state, so that we'll get a required shape. And here you can see another picture. There is a one more diagram or one more image. So the raw material is heated into above recrystallization temperature. So where if you work on that particular material at that particular temperature, we can change its shape as per our requirement. And you can see here one more image where structures are fabricated. So the raw material is having in the form of a simple rods, but those rods are joined to get a particular structure using a welding process. And now you can see here a good images are the products which are made from the wood material. So this is also one of the manufacturing process where we call as woodworking process. Basically, the manufacturing process is classified into four categories. The first one is metal forming process, and the second one is metal casting process, and the third one is welding process, and the last one is machining process. The machining process is having a separate significance, and that we'll discuss a little later. So what is forming process? The forming process, the raw material we convert from one form of shape into the desired form of shape. So here, if you see, this forming process is classified further into two types. One is bulk manufacturing or bulk forming process, and another one is sheet metal forming process. What is this bulk forming process? In bulk forming process, the raw material dimensions are larger when compared with sheet metal. In the case of sheet metal, the dimensions, especially the thickness, is very less, around 1 mm or less than 1 mm, where we work on the sheet metal to get the desired shape. And coming to the casting process, in a casting process here, the raw material, we take it in the form of uneven shape, and that raw material we heat into liquid states, or we convert the raw material by heating with the help of the furnaces into the liquid state, and that liquid we pour into a mold cavity, and the cavity consisting of the shape which we required, and the liquid material which we poured into the mold cavity will be solidified, and the solidified material is the output which we required. And the next one is welding process. So the welding is a joining process where the two or three are as per our requirement, we join the materials together. Okay, so the joining process further classified are there are different types of welding processes are there, that is gas welding, arc welding, thermite welding, resistance welding, laser welding, friction welding, electron beam welding, etc. So these are the basic manufacturing process. Along with that, there is another traditional manufacturing process called as machining process. So you can see here, the machining process is identified or made as a separate because in machining process, we remove the material, then adding. Why we require the machining process? If you see the forming process or casting process, welding process, we get the required shape, but the required finish and the required dimensions or accuracy we may not get. So to get required accuracy and the surface finish, we need to depend on a machining process, and this is one of the manufacturing process. Here the material is removed in the form of a chips, and that is called as the traditional machining process. Whereas non-traditional manufacturing machining process, where the material is removed in the by erosion process or abrasion process, like abrasive jet machining, electron discharge machining, etc. So this is a simple and the basic classification of manufacturing process. So let us discuss first about casting process, and the casting process we can also call as a metal casting process. So the first step is, in the casting process we have to prepare a wooden pattern. What is this pattern? Pattern is the replica of the object which you want with the metal or the desired material. So the first we prepare the pattern, and then that pattern we place it in the mold boxes that we call as a flask. And here you can see drag flask is there, and a cope flask is there here. And we place the pattern here, and then we fill around the pattern with a molding sand, that is for example molding sand in the form of a sand. Okay, and then we remove the pattern, and then if you want any holes and other things, we place the core, and then above the drag flask we place the cope flask, and then again we filled with sand after placing the riser pin and runner pin. So the purpose of runner pin is to pour the raw material, liquid material into this mold cavity, and the purpose of riser pin is to whether the mold cavity is filled or not, in order to identify, and it also acts as a reservoir to avoid shrinkages during the solidification process. So after preparing the cope and a drag flask, we assemble again, and then we will get the empty space that is called as a cavity, and in this cavity we pour the liquid material so that the liquid material will be solidified. After solidifying, we will get the components like this. So you can see here, this is the engine casing and this is pump casing. So this is called as a casting process. In a casting process, the raw material we pour in the mold cavity in the form of a liquid stage, and the liquid material will be solidified so that we'll get the final solid product like this. And the next one is welding process. So what is welding? Welding is a metal joining process or joining of two or more pieces to get the required structure. So there are different types of welding process are there: arc welding, gas welding, spot welding, etc. And you can see here, this is in a structure, automobile body structure, and this body structure is made from the spot welding. And you can see here there is a TIG welding process where this piece and this piece is joining with the help of an electrode here and electric input, that is with the help of electric arc. So basically the welding process is a joining of two or more materials to get the required shape. And the next process is metal working process. Here the raw material will be changed from one shape to another shape, and we will not take the raw material in the form of a liquid state, or we are not going to join the raw material. We take it in the one form, and that one form, that form we will convert into the required shape. For example, you can see in this diagram, so the raw material we have taken here in the form of a round cylinder, and that round cylinder we place it into the a chamber after heating, and then that billet is forced through this die, so that the raw material which is there in the form of initially a larger cylinder is converted into a small cylinder. So this process we call as extrusion process, and this is one of the metal forming process. And you can see here this is bending process, where the metal we take it in the form of a flat pieces, and those Woku pieces we bend as per our requirement. Suppose if you want V bend, we will take the raw material in the form of a sheet or a plate, and then we bend into the V shape. And if you want to U shape, we can also bend into U shape by using different types of tools like V bend tool, U bend tool, etc. And there here you can see there is another process called as a forging. Forging is another type of metal working process, where the raw material is heated and placed in between lower die and upper die, and then we apply the force. So when you apply the force, this raw material which is placed between the lower die and upper die is having higher at higher temperature condition, and when you apply the force, and the raw material will be deformed into desired shape depending upon the shape of the upper die and lower die cavity. And you can see here this is another example of a sheet metal working process. Okay, you can see the raw material we have taken a simple plate, but that plate is converted into a shape like bowls. So this is a metal working process. And another process which I already introduced, that is machining process. So machining process, you can see here the raw material we have taken in some form, and we are removing some amount of material here. Why? Because as I told, most of the primary manufacturing process like casting, welding, or metal forming process will not produce required shape and the dimensions, or even surface finish. So in order to get the required shape and surface finish and dimensional accuracy also, we need to depend on machining process. So in the machining process, we are going to remove a small amount of material. That's what you can see here. Okay, while removing, we get not only the dimensional accuracy, we also get the surface finish. So that's what you can see here. These are the components after finishing, and you can get you can see here some shining on the surface finish or surface components. And you can see these are the components which are produced from this machining process. And here you can see this machine is called as a lathe machine. Most of the times the lathe machine we use it for axisymmetric jobs like cylinders. And you can see here these are the chess coins which are produced from this machine called as lathe machine. And you can see here there is another machining process which we perform on milling machine. And you can see here these are the outputs of milling machine which is produced from this machine. One you can see here gear, and another one you can see here gearbox. And these are other machine tools which can be used for making of or producing of splines, gears, or even shafts. And we can also produce cams, etc. on these machines. And depending upon the size and the shape of the raw material, okay, we can select any one of these machines like shaper, planer, and slotting machine. And here you can see the another machine tool called as a drilling and boring. The purpose of drilling is to make the holes. That's what you can see here. Okay, so making of a hole or drilling process you can see here. And we can make a smaller holes with the help of drilling machine, and we can make very larger holes using a boring machine. You can see here this is a boring process where enlarging of existing holes, if you do that process, and that process we call as boring process. And last Second category of machining process we call as a grinding process, and the grinding process mostly we use it for finishing. Of course, the lathe, milling, shaping also we use it for finishing process, but sometimes we require more surface finish and more accurate. Where these okay, some of the special applications like defense, aerospace, or uh, aeronautical applications where we require more precision and more accurate and more surface finish. So in that case, we need to depend upon another process called as a grinding process. Here we remove very less amount of material. We can see here, this is the component which is produced from some okay, one of the machining process or manufacturing process, but on this component the grinding process is performed. After grinding process you can see the difference, and this is having very dull surface, and you can see this process is very shiny and good looking. So that's the purpose we use a grinding process to improve the surface finish as well as dimensional accuracy. And here also you can see this is a turning component, this is after finishing, and this is before grinding process. Okay, so this is a basic introduction about grinding process, manufacturing process. Okay, so in order to understand a little bit clearly, so I will just show one video of manufacturing process so that you can able to
Molten
understand
metal
what
is
is
formed into a
manufacturing
pipe using
and how
centrifugal
the
casting
manufacturing
machines.
industry
The
looks like.
backup ladle
So this
fills
is
the
the
quad
casting
lid,
process. You
while
can see
operators
the
prepare
raw
the trough for
material
the iron.
is
An
available in the
operator
form of a
secures a
liquid
core
stage,
into the
and
front
that is
of
the
the
mold
machine. This core keeps
the
the
operator
molten
is
iron
preparing to
inside the
produce a
mold and
component.
forms the bell of the pipe. The mold
And
begins to
inside that
spin as the
mold,
casting
we are going
machine
to pour
travels
the raw
uphill
material
to receive
in
the
the form
iron.
of a liquid
The iron is poured into the
state.
mold at
That's what you can see.
2,500
The
degrees
equipment is
Fahrenheit
moving
as the
to
casting machine
pour
slowly
the
moves downhill
raw material. Now
so
you
that
can
the
see the raw
mold is
material is
evenly
entered
filled
into
with
the
molten
mold,
iron.
and here the mold is in the form of a hollow cylindrical shape. That's what you can see. Now the pouring is over, solidification is almost over. Now you can see the hollow cylinder is obtained from the centrifugal casting process. Okay, so after any casting process, some of the fluxes will be there, and those we need to remove it. So this is one process we call as casting process. So this is related to metal forming process, that to extrusion process. Extrusion process is nothing but the raw material we take it in the form of a billets, maybe mostly in the form of solid cylinders. In that solid cylinders we convert into the desired shapes. That's what you can see here. The raw material is in the form of cylinders we call as a billets, and the billets will be heated above recrystallization temperature, and then we process through extrusion equipment, and it consisting of a die. And the die, okay, this raw material will pass through die. After passing through die we'll get a required shape or the shape which we want. So now you can see the raw material is entering into the extrusion equipment. So that is loading of the raw material into the onto the extrusion equipment, and we are applying the forces. That's what you can see here. Now you can see this is an output of the extrusion process. So we almost place it around 30 or 40 centimeters diameter component into the die, but now the output you can see a small rods which is having a particular shape of a small hole with a particular channel. So you can see here, this is another example, eye cross section component, and you can see here. So these are the examples for the extrusion process.
Commercial length. Extrusions are then placed
So you can
on
see
racks as they
these are the outputs from the that cylindrical billet.
Extrusion alloys reach their optimal strength through the process of aging, sometimes known
Even
as
from the extrusion process we can also produce a small around 10 mm diameter, 1 mm diameter rods or even wires.
The aging oven further strengthens or hardens the profile through controlled thermal treatments that affect the metallurgical structure.
So that's all about this basic introduction to the manufacturing. So today we have discussed about definition of the manufacturing process and the classification of manufacturing process and a small introduction to each and every process. So that's all for today. Thank you.